Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. This is the new, well, it's not really new, but this is a Netflix movie that features the final performance of the late, great Chadwick Boseman. I saw this movie almost a week ago now, and that's really rare for me to go that long in between seeing a movie and then reviewing a movie. And there's a reason for that. It's because I don't really care for this movie. I didn't really enjoy this movie. And I don't like being Mr. Contrarian. I don't like pissing in people's cornflakes. I honestly, in fact, there was a movie that came out just a little bit over a month ago that was almost universally praised that I didn't enjoy, and I didn't review it because I don't like being that guy, but I'm not a huge fan of this movie. With that said, this is kind of a weird one. I didn't care for this movie, but I'm not telling people that they shouldn't see it. I think people will make up judgments for themselves, and I think a lot of people will like this movie. A lot of people have liked this movie. It's got a 97% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, the last I checked. There are good things about it. I'll start off with what the big one is, and that's Chadwick Boseman's final performances. It's incredible. He's amazing. I personally don't believe he should win Best Actor for it. I would still probably give the edge to Riz Ahmed for The Sound of Metal, but he is sensational in this, and it's so sad because Chadwick Boseman achieved a level of fame that 99.9% of actors will never achieve, and yet you watch this performance and you get the impression that he was just getting started, that his best performances, his best days as an actor were still ahead of him, and it's really sad. He is sensational in this, far and away the best thing about this movie. In fact, all the performances are good. He's the biggest standout, but they're all very good. I thought the last 2-3 minutes of this movie were actually really good and really poignant, and I was surprised at how much the film almost won me over at the end, because it's very subtly done, and I got to the end and I'm like, oh, okay, so that's what they were going for. That's pretty poignant. I actually bumped up my rating a grade or two because I give credit to any movie that's actually trying to say something and succeeds at saying that particular thing. I don't have much more praise for this film. In fact, there's a lot of things I found really wrong with it. Mainly that the titular character of Ma Rainey, played by Viola Davis, who's an amazing actress. I mean, one of my favorite actresses. She is a true chameleon. She's incredible in everything, and she's good in this. But the character of Ma Rainey is so unlikable. And I've talked about this many times on here already. I don't know why this is such a running theme, but there's a big difference between unlikable and unwatchable. I've seen a lot of movies that feature great characters that are inherently unlikable. I always go back to Patrick Bateman or Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network, but my favorite film of 2020, Promising Young Woman, the main character in that, Carey Mulligan's character, really walks that line. Sometimes she's likable, she's always very vulnerable, but sometimes you're kind of walking that edge with her. There are moments in that film, not just her, but all the characters in that movie at points are somewhat unlikable, never unwatchable. You're always fascinated watching them on screen. The character of Ma Rainey in this movie is abrasive and rude and mean and not funny or charismatic in any way. You just don't like her at all. And the movie is about her. I mean, you could say it's about Chadwick Boseman as well, but they're the two main players, and she's not fun to watch at all. One of the great things about film in general is that a film can take a topic that you may not care for and make it immersive and fascinating. The example I always go back to, because it's the greatest movie ever, maybe, I mean, the best movie of the last 10 years, is Whiplash. I couldn't care less about jazz drumming. I don't care. I don't know anything about it. But in that film, with Damien Chazelle's amazing editing and the story and the great acting and it's the greatest edited movie of all time. For an hour and 40 minutes, jazz drumming is the most important thing in your life when you watch that movie. And this movie is about the blues, right? And I was just so bored. I just found the subject matter so uninteresting, and the movie doesn't do a good job of making it interesting. This is not an immersive film in any way, and a big reason for that is this is based on a play. And I talked about this when I reviewed One Night in Miami, which is a great movie. And one of the complaints I had was that movie felt very small. I rescind that criticism. I honestly do, because yes, it's a small film, but it still felt like a movie. It was still cinematic when you're watching it. This is based on a play, and there's nothing about it that feels cinematic at all. The movie kind of looks cheap. It feels cheap. It's directed, in my opinion, fairly flatly. Now, I know what the response to the people who actually care, I know what those people would say is, well, what about Hamilton? You loved Hamilton. That was just a filmed version of a stage play. I'll tell you why that is completely different. Hamilton was a phenomenon that a lot of people wanted to see and didn't get a chance to see, and to see Hamilton in a format other than the way that it was originally intended to be seen, with that original cast would have been criminal because they're all so good together. And not to mention, well, yes, that is a filmed version of a stage play. Even that kind of felt cinematic. The shot composition, the lighting, there's suspension of disbelief, but it was still an immersive experience. Now, a lot of that could be forgiven, and I tried to step out of it for a second and say, okay, what if I saw this as a stage play? What if I watched it as a stage play? Would I feel differently? And I feel like, no, not really. It's boring. Nothing happens in this. There's nothing of real consequence until the very end, and even then, I was like, there's something very serious that happens at the end of this movie, and I was just like, man, this is really out of left field, dude. Yeah, I just couldn't get into it. That's how I felt watching this whole thing. There's a lot of moments in it that are objectively good. There's some good writing. There's some good lines. There's some really good acting, mainly by Chadwick Boseman, who's incredible. But I just watched it. I was so uninterested by this whole thing. It's like, if you're going to watch a film from 2020 that's based on a play, watch One Night in Miami, because that feels cinematic. It had something to say. It had great performances. This, despite a phenomenal performance by Chadwick Boseman, there's nothing in it that's memorable, honestly. I found the whole thing very forgettable, and I would never watch it again. Now, with that said, I know a lot of people really, really like this movie. I know a lot of people who've loved this movie and said it's one of the better movies of 2020. Maybe I am off. This is one of those instances in which I will say, judge for yourself, because like I said, I don't like being contrarian, and maybe there's just something about it that I missed, but personally, I couldn't get into it. Personal taste is a thing. Like, I know film is subjective, and this is one of those instances in which I watched it, and it's like, there's things in it that are good, there's some things in it that are great, but overall, as an experience, forgettable. Didn't particularly care for it. I give it a 5 out of 10. It's not an awful movie. I wish they would have written a script where things actually happened, because I found this movie completely boring. This movie is like 90 minutes. It felt like it was 4 hours. That'll do it for this review. I haven't been on social media in a while, but feel free to subscribe, like, comment, tell me I'm an idiot for having an opinion that you disagree with. I'm sure that's coming. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Peace and happiness.